Have you ever looked at someone and felt like you could read their mind? Like you understood exactly what they were thinking without them saying a word? The truth is far more complex and far more fascinating than your intuition suggests. What you think you know about human nature, what you believe drives people's behavior and motivations, is built on a foundation of psychological principles that operate silently beneath conscious awareness. Every single interaction you have, every relationship you build, every judgment you make about another person is shaped by invisible forces that neither you nor they fully comprehend. For centuries, philosophers have contemplated human nature, trying to understand what makes people tick, why we behave the way we do, and what hidden mechanisms drive our choices and emotions. But it was not until the modern era of psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral economics that we began to truly uncover the sophisticated architecture of the human mind. Today, we know more than ever before about the tricks our minds play, not just on ourselves, but on others, and the reciprocal ways in which we manipulate each other, sometimes consciously, but more often completely automatically. This is not a video about becoming a master manipulator or learning dark psychology to exploit others. Rather, it is an exploration of the genuine scientific principles that govern human perception, social dynamics, and interpersonal influence. When you understand these hidden mechanisms, when you see the psychological scaffolding beneath everyday interactions, you inevitably change how you see people. You begin to recognize that beneath the surface, presentations that mask their true selves beneath the faces they wear in public are complex, vulnerable beings driven by the same neurological patterns, instincts, and biases that drive you. Over the next several hours, we will journey through 25 fascinating psychological phenomena that shape how humans perceive, understand, judge, and manipulate each other. Each insight will be grounded in research. Each principle will be illustrated with real-world examples, and each mechanism will be explained in terms you can immediately recognize in your own life. By the end, you will have a roadmap to human nature, a deeper, empathetic understanding of why people do what they do, and a more nuanced, compassionate view of the people around you. The goal is not to make you cynical or paranoid, but to awaken you to the hidden sophistication of human psychology, to help you recognize patterns that influence every encounter, and ultimately to expand your capacity for understanding and empathy. 1. The halo effect. How one trait makes us judge everything about a person. Imagine walking into a conference room and seeing a tall, attractive, well-dressed person. Before they say a single word, before they demonstrate competence or expertise, before anything concrete, you already think they are smart, capable, and trustworthy. This snap judgment is not your fault. It is the work of a psychological principle called the halo effect, a cognitive bias where the impression created by one trait bleeds over into how we judge every other aspect of that person. The halo effect was first identified by psychologist Edward Thorndike in 1920, when he discovered that people who were physically attractive were also rated as more intelligent, more moral, and more socially skilled. Thorndike called this the general impression phenomenon, and it remains one of the most powerful biases affecting how we perceive others. The mechanism is straightforward but insidious. Your brain desperately wants to create coherent impressions of people. It is cognitively efficient to assume that if someone is beautiful, they are also intelligent. If they are eloquent, they must be honest. If they succeed in one domain, they must excel in others. Your mind fills in gaps, creates a complete personality portrait using limited information. One prominent trait becomes a halo, lighting up everything else we believe about that person. This has staggering real-world consequences. In courtrooms, handsome defendants receive lighter sentences. In classrooms, attractive professors are rated as more knowledgeable than their actual teaching materials warrant. In job interviews, candidates who are physically attractive are more likely to be hired regardless of qualifications. The halo effect skews justice, interferes with meritocracy, and shapes the very trajectory of human lives based on factors that have nothing to do with the quality of one's character or abilities. Interestingly, the halo effect works both directions. A person known for one strength may be forgiven for failures in other areas. A CEO known for bold decisions might be praised for taking risks, even when those risks border on recklessness. A politician known for compassion might be excused for ethical lapses. The halo becomes a buffer, a protective glow that makes it harder to see flaws. Yet, there's another layer to this phenomenon. The halo effect is not just about visual appearance or public image. It extends to any prominent characteristic. If someone is known as intelligent, we assume they are also kind. If they are known as generous, we assume they are also intelligent. Our brains are constantly attempting to build coherent, unified impressions of people. And this impulse, while efficient, is also a profound source of error and injustice. The neural basis of the halo effect involves the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain associated with social judgments and trait inferences. When processing information about a person with a strong halo, this region shows increased activity, suggesting that the brain is actively using that positive impression to infer other traits. The effect becomes self-reinforcing. We pay more attention to information that confirms our initial impression and discount information that contradicts it, a process called confirmation bias. Understanding the halo effect should change how you see people around you. When you recognize that your initial impression of someone is creating a mental halo around them, you can begin to question that impression. You can look beyond the surface characteristic and ask yourself, what else do I actually know about this person versus what am I assuming? You can work towards seeing people in their full complexity rather than through the distorting lens of a single trait. 2. The fundamental attribution. Error. Why we blame people instead of situations. Someone cuts you off in traffic and your immediate thought is that they are a reckless, careless driver. You do not think they might be rushing to the hospital to see a dying relative. You do not consider that they did not see your car or that their attention was momentarily diverted by a phone call. You blame the person, not the situation. This tendency is so universal, so automatic, that psychologists have given it a name. The fundamental attribution error, also called the correspondence bias. It is our tendency to attribute other people's behavior to internal disposition, their personality, their character, their intelligence, while ignoring or underweighting the external situational factors that may be driving that behavior. The classic study demonstrating this effect was conducted by Lee Ross in 1977. Participants watched videos of someone answering trivia questions and either praising or criticizing the other participants afterward. The observers assumed that the person was naturally intelligent if they seemed knowledgeable, and naturally mean or incompetent if they seemed unaware or critical. In reality, the observers did not know that the behavior was assigned to them by the experimenter. The person had no choice in what they said, yet observers attributed the behavior entirely to internal personality traits. The irony is that when it comes to our own behavior, we make the opposite error. When we cut someone off in traffic, we know it is because we did not see them, because we are preoccupied, because we are having an off day. We attribute our behavior to circumstances. This is called the actor-observer bias, or the ultimate attribution error, and it is a profound source of misunderstanding and conflict between people. Why does this happen at all? Why would our brains make such a consistent, systematic error? The answer involves cognitive simplicity, and the architecture of attention. When you observe someone else's behavior, you are primarily focused on that person, on their actions, on what they are doing. The situation is background, relatively invisible. Your brain defaults to explaining behavior in terms of what is foreground, what is salient, what is immediately apparent. The person is the figure, the situation is the background, and we are wired to pay attention to figures. In contrast, when you are the actor in the situation, you are acutely aware of the situational constraints acting on you. You are aware of your intentions, your distractions, your pressures, your limited information. You are aware because you are inside the situation. You cannot help but attribute your behavior partly or wholly to circumstances. The fundamental attribution error has profound moral and social implications. It shapes criminal justice systems where judges and juries often blame individuals for crime while ignoring the socioeconomic circumstances that may have contributed to it. It shapes poverty itself when people attribute poverty to personal failings rather than systemic obstacles. It shapes relationships where conflicts arise because people systematically attribute their partner's hurtful behavior to character flaws, while their own hurtful behavior is due to stress or misunderstanding. Yet this error is not uniform. Some cultures show it more strongly than others. Individualistic Western cultures show stronger tendencies toward fundamental attribution error than more collectivist Eastern cultures, where situational factors are more naturally considered. Age also matters. As people get older, they become somewhat better at considering situational factors, though the bias never fully disappears. The neural basis of this error likely involves the temporal parietal junction and the prefrontal cortex regions associated with theory of mind and social reasoning. When making judgments about others, the brain activates regions associated with considering intentions and traits. When making judgments about oneself, different neural regions are activated, those associated with memory and self-reflection. This neural dissociation may underlie the systematic differences in how we judge ourselves versus others. When you recognize the fundamental attribution error operating in your thinking, you have an opportunity to expand your empathy. The difficult person you know might not be difficult because of who they are, but because of what they are dealing with. The friend who forgot your birthday might not be selfish, but overwhelmed. The colleague who snapped at you might not be hostile, but under pressure. By questioning your automatic attributions, by asking what situational factors might be at play, you begin to see people not as fixed entities with fixed traits, but as adaptive beings responding to circumstances. 3. The backfire effect. Why correcting someone often makes them more wrong. You present evidence that contradicts someone's belief. You expect them to change their mind, to acknowledge the evidence and update their position. Instead, they become more entrenched, more certain that their original belief was right. This is the backfire effect, a phenomenon that seems to suggest that attempting to correct false beliefs can actually strengthen those beliefs, making people double down on misinformation even when confronted with contrary facts. The backfire effect was first described by Brendan Nyhan and Jason Reifler in their 2005 study examining how people respond to political misinformation. They found that when exposed to evidence that contradicted a political belief, people did not simply become more accurate. Instead, those with the strongest initial commitment to the false belief actually became more confident in it after seeing the correcting information. It was as if the brain was defending its original territory, attacking the invader rather than welcoming new evidence. The mechanism involves several psychological processes working in concert. First, there is the identity protective cognition bias, where beliefs become intertwined with identity and self-image, particularly for highly political or ideological topics. If you have defined yourself as someone who holds a particular belief, then evidence against that belief feels like evidence against you as a person. Your brain perceives it as a threat. Second, there is the illusory truth effect, where people find it easier to remember a statement than they do to remember the source of that statement. When you encounter a correction, you might remember the original false claim later on and mistake it for truth, having forgotten the source. Third, there is the simple fact that humans engage in elaborate post hoc rationalizations. When presented with evidence against a belief, the brain does not shut down. Instead, it activates generating counter-arguments, searching for flaws in the evidence, finding reasons to doubt the source. Your brain is not a passive receiver of truth. It is an active defending system protecting existing mental structures. However, recent research has complicated this picture. The backfire effect, while real, may be smaller, less common, and more context-dependent than initially thought. Some studies have failed to replicate the effect entirely, while others have found that it only occurs under specific conditions. The conditions seem to include strong political identification with the belief, deep emotional investment in the belief, and high threat framing of the correction where the evidence feels like an attack. This has important implications for how we think about misinformation and belief change. It suggests that simply providing people with facts is not enough. Facts presented in a threatening manner or that clash with someone's identity are more likely to be rejected or even to backfire. Yet facts presented neutrally in a non-threatening context may be more likely to change minds. The delivery, the framing, the emotional tenor of the correction matters as much as or more than the evidence itself. A related phenomenon called the continued influence of misinformation demonstrates that once a false belief is established, it is extremely difficult to completely remove it even after comprehensive correction. People continue to be influenced by information they know to be false, suggesting that correction is not erasure. The original misinformation remains in memory alongside the correction, and both can continue to influence judgment and behavior. The implications of the backfire effect for seeing people clearly are profound. It suggests that people are not irrational in any simple sense. Rather, they are complex, adaptive beings whose reasoning processes are intricately tied to identity values and emotional investment. They are defending something fundamental when they resist your facts. They are protecting their sense of self. Understanding this should cultivate humility about your own corrections and those you attempt to make of others. It suggests that aggressive, evidence-based arguments may not be the most effective way to change minds. Instead, building trust, creating psychological safety, establishing common ground, and allowing people to change their minds without losing face may be more effective. It suggests that seeing people clearly means recognizing that belief is not simply about truth-seeking. It is about identity, about belonging, about meaning-making. The backfire effect reminds us that human reasoning is embedded in emotion, psychology, and identity. This is not a flaw that education can eliminate. It is a feature of being human. When you recognize this, you can approach disagreements with more compassion, more humility, and more realism about what it actually takes to change minds. 4. The mere exposure effect. Why familiarity breeds affection. You meet someone for the first time and do not particularly like them. You see them again, and again, and again. Each encounter with neutral disinterest becomes slightly warmer. After multiple exposures, you find yourself actually liking this person, thinking they are more attractive, more likable, more trustworthy. You have not had any new information about them. The only thing that has changed is exposure. The mere fact of repeated contact has changed your feelings. This is the mere exposure effect, a phenomenon first identified by psychologist Robert Zajonc in the 1960s and replicated hundreds of times since. The effect is powerful, simple, and seemingly automatic. The more you are exposed to something, the more you like it. This applies to faces, objects, songs, advertisements, and people. In one classic study, Zhejiang showed participants photographs of unfamiliar faces with varying frequencies. Some faces appeared once, some appeared twice, some appeared 20 times. Then participants rated their liking of each face. The result was clear: the more times participants had seen a face, the more they liked it. The mere exposure effect is so robust, so reproducible, that it is considered one of the most reliable phenomena in social psychology. The mechanism underlying the mere exposure effect appears to involve fluency, or the ease with which information is processed. When you encounter something repeatedly, your brain becomes more efficient at processing it. That processing fluency feels good. Your mind interprets that ease of processing as liking. The more familiar something is, the more fluently you can process it, and the more you like it. There is also an evolutionary logic to this effect. In ancestral environments, repeated exposure to something meant it was safe, you had encountered it before and survived. It made evolutionary sense to feel more positive about the familiar. The unfamiliar carried potential danger, so caution was warranted. This deep biological pattern may explain why we are drawn to the familiar and wary of the novel. But the mere exposure effect has a dark side. It has been used extensively in marketing and persuasion. Repeated exposure through advertising creates increased liking for products and brands, even when the advertisements contain no substantive information. You see a brand name enough times and you begin to like it, not because you have evidence of quality, but merely because of exposure. This is why advertisers hammer the same message again and again. It is not because they think you need convincing by logic, but because they know that exposure breeds affection. The effect also has implications for relationships and prejudice. Neighborhoods that become more diverse as a result of people moving in and having repeated contact with people of different backgrounds often show decreased prejudice and increased intergroup liking. The mere exposure of being around people different from oneself breeds familiarity, and with it, increased positive regard. Conversely, isolation from other groups allows prejudice and fear to flourish unchecked by the moderating influence of actual contact. There are limits to the mere exposure effect, however. If exposure occurs in contexts marked by negative interactions, repeated contact may breed contempt rather than affection. If every time you encounter someone they treat you poorly, no amount of exposure will create liking. Additionally, some types of exposure seem to backfire. If you are exposed to a marketing message you find offensive or manipulative, and you recognize the manipulation, your liking may actually decrease with repeated exposure. This is called the advertisement wear-out effect. The mere exposure effect also interacts with other psychological processes. If you initially dislike something for logical reasons, mere exposure will not overcome that. But if your initial reaction is neutral or slightly positive, mere exposure will strengthen it. The effect is strongest for stimuli that are initially neutral and gradually become familiar. What does the mere exposure effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that much of our attraction to and liking of others is influenced by factors that have nothing to do with who they truly are. We like people we have been around frequently, even if we have not really gotten to know them in depth. We feel drawn to people who are familiar, even if that familiarity comes from passive exposure rather than genuine connection. This insight should make us more self-aware about our feelings toward others. When you find yourself drawn to someone, ask yourself whether it is because of genuine compatibility and understanding, or whether it is simply the product of repeated exposure. Are you drawn to someone because they are good for you or because they are familiar? This distinction matters because acting on mere exposure effects can lead you to surround yourself with people based on proximity rather than genuine compatibility. The effect also suggests something profound about seeing others clearly. It tells us that liking familiarity and comfort are deeply wired into us. We are creatures of habit and familiarity. We like what we know. This is not a flaw, but a fundamental aspect of human psychology. Recognizing this helps us understand why people cling to the familiar even when the new might be better, why they prefer their own group even when mixing would be beneficial, why prejudice persists against the unfamiliar. 5. The Dunning-Kruger effect, the tragedy of low ability and high confidence. The worst drivers believe they are above average drivers. The worst workers think they are better at their job than most colleagues. The least knowledgeable people in a room are often the most confident about their opinions. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with low ability or low knowledge dramatically overestimate their competence, while people with high ability often underestimate their own capabilities. The effect was first documented by David Dunning and Justin Kruger in 1999. In their experiments, participants were given tests of humor, logic, and grammar. Afterward, participants estimated their percentile ranking. The results were striking. Those who performed in the bottom quartile estimated they were in the 62nd percentile. Those who performed in the top quartile estimated they were in the 67th percentile. The worst performers were nearly as confident as the best performers, despite a massive gap in actual performance. The mechanism underlying the Dunning-Kruger effect is brutal and elegant. To recognize your own incompetence, you need to know what competence looks like. But if you lack knowledge in a domain, you cannot recognize the knowledge you lack. You lack the very metacognitive skills needed to assess your own understanding. The ignorant are not just wrong about facts, they are wrong about their wrongness. There is also a confidence effect, where people have a tendency to be overconfident about their knowledge and abilities across the board. We do not naturally doubt ourselves. Self-doubt is something we learn, usually the hard way, through repeated failure and humility. In the absence of compelling evidence to the contrary, we tend toward overconfidence. The effect is not uniform across people or domains. People who are intelligent and aware of how much they do not know tend to be more susceptible to the effect in domains where they have less experience. Conversely, people with genuine expertise in a domain often underestimate their knowledge, assuming that what is obvious to them is equally obvious to others. They forget what it was like to not know. There is also a Dunning effect in reverse, where competent people underestimate how many others are as competent as they are. Someone who is good at public speaking assumes that almost everyone can speak well publicly. Someone who is good at math assumes that math is easy for most people. Experts systematically misestimate the difficulty of tasks they find easy. The implications of the Dunning-Kruger effect are staggering. It helps explain the backfire effect discussed earlier. People with low knowledge are overconfident about their knowledge, so when you present them with evidence against their beliefs, they are baffled. They do not see themselves as wrong because they lack the ability to recognize their error. It helps explain conspiracy theories, where people with little evidence or expertise confidently assert complex theories about world events. It helps explain the reluctance of talented people to take leadership roles. They see all the complexity and difficulty, they see how much they do not know, so they believe they are not ready. Meanwhile, less competent people charge ahead with unjustified confidence. It also has serious implications for how people interact across competence levels. Imagine a meeting where someone with genuine expertise sits quietly, because they are aware of how much they do not know, while someone with surface-level knowledge speaks confidently. The confident person may be heard as more credible, more authoritative, because confidence is often mistaken for competence. The neural basis of the Dunning-Kruger effect likely involves the anterior insula and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex regions involved in metacognition, self-awareness, and error detection. When people lack knowledge or ability, these regions are less active. They literally cannot monitor their own performance as well, because the neural systems that enable self-monitoring are themselves underdeveloped in the domain. What does the Dunning-Kruger effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that confidence is not a reliable indicator of actual knowledge or ability. Someone can be supremely confident and completely wrong. It suggests that people who seem arrogant or who speak with certainty about complex matters may actually lack the knowledge to understand the true complexity. It suggests that people who seem uncertain, hesitant, or willing to acknowledge they do not know something may actually have more genuine understanding. It should make you suspicious of your own confidence, particularly about topics in which you have limited experience. When you are very confident about something, ask yourself whether you have the genuine expertise that would justify that confidence. Or are you experiencing the Dunning-Kruger effect, believing you understand something you have only superficial knowledge of? It should also make you more humble about judging others. When you see someone acting with what you believe is unjustified confidence, do not assume they are deliberately being arrogant or deceiving themselves. They may genuinely lack the metacognitive ability to recognize their own incompetence. They may be experiencing the effects of overconfidence bias that affects all humans to some degree. Most importantly, the Dunning-Kruger effect should make you question the relationship between confidence and truth. We live in a world where confident voices are given more credibility than hesitant ones, where people who express certainty are listened to, and people who express uncertainty are overlooked. But the Dunning-Kruger effect tells us that confidence and truth are often inversely related, that those who truly understand often understand how little they know, while those who know little are often most confident. In a world drowning in misinformation and overconfidence, this insight is more important than ever. 6. The illusion of explanatory depth. Why we think we understand more than we do. You understand how a zipper works, right? You have used zippers countless times. You have the concept down. But can you actually explain the mechanism in detail? Can you draw a diagram explaining precisely how the slider interlocks the teeth, how the teeth are shaped to work together, how the whole mechanism functions? Try it. Most people, when actually asked to explain something they thought they understood, discover that their understanding is far shallower than they assumed. This is the illusion of explanatory depth, a phenomenon where people believe they understand complex systems far better than they actually do. The illusion dissolves when they attempt to explain the system in detail. Suddenly, gaps in knowledge become apparent, false assumptions are revealed. The elaborate explanatory structure that felt solid becomes gossamer thin. The effect was first documented by Leonid Rosenblatt and Frank Keel in 2002. They asked participants to rate how well they understood various everyday devices. They then asked some participants to try to explain these devices in detail. After attempting to explain them, participants dramatically revised their estimates of their understanding downward. The act of trying to explain revealed the shallowness of their understanding. The illusion of explanatory depth applies not just to how devices work, but to how complex systems function: politics, economics, science, social dynamics. Most people believe they understand why the economy works the way it does. Ask them to explain the mechanisms in detail, and the illusion dissolves. Ask people why they believe what they believe, and many cannot articulate the underlying reasoning. The belief was never grounded in careful reasoning, but in something more superficial. The mechanism behind this illusion is related to what is called fluency. When you have encountered a concept many times when you can retrieve it quickly from memory, you feel like you understand it. You confuse familiarity with understanding. You've heard about global warming many times, so you feel like you understand the mechanisms. You have watched political debates, so you feel like you understand political systems. You have read about psychology, so you feel like you understand human behavior. But surface familiarity is not genuine understanding. There is also a social component to the illusion. In everyday conversations, people do not press each other for detailed explanations. Someone says, "I understand why people behave that way," and others accept that without demanding proof. So we move through life with shallow understandings, feeling confident in our knowledge because no one is testing that knowledge. The illusion persists. The illusion of explanatory depth has important implications for how people interact with information and make decisions. It helps explain why people become overconfident about complex political positions. They have read or heard arguments for their position and feel like they understand them. They have not deeply engaged with the complexity or the strongest arguments against their position. But their feeling of understanding is very real and very confident. It helps explain why people resist admitting they do not understand something. Your brain does not want to burst the bubble of understanding it is carefully constructed. So even when you encounter information that should make you realize you do not understand something, the brain resists that conclusion and instead clings to the comforting illusion of understanding. There is evidence that the illusion of explanatory depth can be reduced through education. The more you actually engage with detailed explanations of complex systems, the better calibrated your sense of your own understanding becomes. But this requires genuine engagement, not just passive exposure. Watching a video about how something works creates the illusion of understanding. Actually studying the detailed mechanisms, building them yourself, struggling with the complexities, creates genuine understanding. The neural basis of the illusion likely involves the default mode network and regions associated with semantic memory. When you think about something in a general abstract way, your brain can create a sense of understanding without actually accessing detailed information. But when you try to explain something, you need to access much more detailed neural representations, and the gaps become apparent. What does the illusion of explanatory depth tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that we often think we understand people far better than we actually do. You think you understand why your partner does what they do. You have a theory. But can you explain it in detail, accounting for all their behaviors and decisions? Usually you cannot. You think you understand why people in different groups believe what they believe. You have read some articles. But can you articulate their actual reasoning in a way that a member of that group would recognize as fair and accurate? Usually you cannot. This is why genuine dialogue across differences is so difficult. We all believe we understand the other side, but our understanding is often thin and cartoonish. It suggests that seeing people clearly requires genuine engagement, not just casual exposure. It requires resisting the comforting illusion that you understand and instead asking deeper questions. It requires a willingness to have your shallow understanding revealed as inadequate. It requires humility. It also suggests that people are more complex than we think. Our theories about why people do what they do are almost always incomplete. We are working with surface-level models when the reality is far more complex. This should breed compassion because it reminds us that people are not the simple creatures our mental models suggest. They are deeply complex beings with histories, fears, desires, and reasoning that we can only partially access. 7. The spotlight effect. Why you think everyone is watching you, but they are not. You show up to class wearing a new shirt that you love, but that is slightly unconventional. You feel like everyone is staring at your shirt. Everyone is noticing your fashion choice. You feel self-conscious and hyper-aware of yourself. In reality, most people barely registered your shirt. They were too busy thinking about themselves, their own appearance, their own insecurities. This is the spotlight effect, the conviction that other people are noticing you, paying attention to you, and judging you far more than they actually are. You feel like you are in a spotlight on a stage with all eyes on you. In reality, most people's eyes are pointed in completely different directions. The spotlight effect was first systematized by psychologists Thomas Gilovich, Victoria Medvec, and Kenneth Savitsky in the 1990s, though the phenomenon has been observed throughout human history. In one study, they had college students wear embarrassing t-shirts while walking through a crowded campus. The students predicted that 46% of people would notice the shirt. In reality, only 23% noticed. The students predicted approximately twice as many people would notice as actually did. The mechanism behind the spotlight effect involves what is called egocentric bias, or the tendency to overestimate how much your own mental states and experiences are apparent to others. You are hyper-aware of yourself, of your appearance, of your behavior. Your self-consciousness is salient to you, but it is not salient to others. Other people are wrapped up in their own experiences, their own insecurities, their own preoccupations. They do not have the bandwidth to scrutinize you the way you scrutinize yourself. There is also an attentional asymmetry at work. You see everyone looking, but you interpret their looks as looking at you specifically. Someone glances across a room, and your spotlight-affected brain interprets it as noticing you and judging you. In reality, they might be looking at something behind you or a random glance with no particular target. The spotlight effect also interacts with anxiety. People who are more anxious tend to experience stronger spotlight effects. This makes sense because the spotlight effect is a manifestation of social anxiety. The anxious brain is hyper-vigilant to threat and interprets ambiguous social cues as threatening. A casual glance becomes an accusatory stare. The spotlight effect varies across cultures. People from more individualistic cultures show stronger spotlight effects than people from more collectivistic cultures, where there is less emphasis on the individual as a distinct entity deserving of scrutiny. It also varies across contexts. You feel a stronger spotlight effect in situations where you stand out or where you are uncertain about social norms. The effect has a positive flip side called the illusion of transparency, which is related but distinct. This is the belief that other people can read your mind, that your emotions and thoughts are apparent to others far more than they actually are. Your anxiety is visible to everyone. Your attraction to someone is obvious. Your skepticism about what someone just said is written across your face. In reality, people are far less able to read your mind and your internal states than you assume. The illusion of transparency has practical implications. It makes people reluctant to ask questions in class because they believe their confusion is obvious, when usually it is not. It makes people reluctant to admit they do not know something because they believe people have already figured out they do not know when usually people have no idea. It leads people to believe they are being deceptive and fooling no one when usually they are successful in presenting whatever face they intended. What does the spotlight effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people are far more wrapped up in themselves than they are in watching or judging you. This should be liberating. It means that the audience you fear is mostly distracted. It means that your self-consciousness is doing you a disservice by making you believe you are more observed than you are. It also tells us something about other people. The people around you who seem so self-assured, who seem comfortable in social situations, who seem unbothered by their appearance or their mistakes, are not necessarily less observed. They may simply be less enthralled to the spotlight effect. They have realized or never believed in the first place that people are paying less attention than it feels like. They have escaped the illusion. It suggests that much of the social anxiety that people experience is based on an illusion. If people are not actually paying the attention you think they are paying, then the threat you perceive is not as real as it feels. This does not mean social anxiety will disappear just by understanding the spotlight effect, but understanding the illusion can be the first step toward loosening its grip. It also suggests something about empathy and understanding. When you realize that people are mostly focused on themselves, you can extend more grace to them. The person who did not laugh at your joke was not judging you. They were thinking about their own problems. The person who seemed annoyed by what you said was not necessarily judging you as stupid. They were thinking about their own concerns. Most importantly, the spotlight effect reminds us that we are living in parallel worlds. Each person is the star of their own movie and barely notices the supporting cast. We are all in our own spotlight, so convinced of our own prominence that we overestimate how prominent we are to others. Seeing people clearly means recognizing that they are not thinking about you as much as you think they are, and they do not expect you to be thinking about them as much as you do. We are all far more absorbed in ourselves than we realize. 8. The clustering illusion. Why we see patterns where none exist. You flip a coin 10 times. By chance you get 3 heads in a row. Your brain notices the pattern. 3 in a row seems significant, but flipping a coin 10 times will produce some patterns just by chance. Your brain is noticing something that is entirely random and attributing meaning to it. This is the clustering illusion, the tendency to see patterns in random data to believe that randomness contains meaningful structure. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, and they are very good at finding patterns even when there are none. The clustering illusion was first systematized by Thomas Gilovich in his study of basketball players shooting. Basketball fans and even basketball players themselves believe in hot hands. A player makes several shots in a row, and everyone believes they have caught fire. They are in a hot streak. The next shot seems more likely to go in because the player is hot. But statistical analysis shows that shots are not more likely to go in after a string of successful shots. The hot hand is an illusion. Randomness produces streaks, and our brains interpret those streaks as meaningful patterns. The clustering illusion appears everywhere. Stock market investors see patterns in random market fluctuations and make investment decisions based on those illusory patterns. Medical professionals see patterns in patient symptoms and arrive at incorrect diagnoses. Gamers believe in lucky controllers and lucky superstitions because they remember the times the superstition coincided with good performance and forget the times it did not. Conspiracy theorists see patterns in random events and construct elaborate theories connecting them. The mechanism behind the clustering illusion involves the way our brains process information. We are wired to detect patterns because in ancestral environments, detecting real patterns was adaptive. A pattern in animal behavior could predict danger. A pattern in weather could predict seasons. Over evolutionary time, our brains became very good at pattern recognition, but they became too good. They see patterns in randomness where no pattern exists. There is also a confirmation bias component. Once you believe you've identified a pattern, you pay attention to evidence that confirms the pattern and ignore evidence that contradicts it. You believe in your lucky shirt, so you remember every time you wore it and had a good day. You forget all the times you wore it and had a bad day. The pattern seems to confirm itself through the filter of your attention. The clustering illusion also interacts with our need for control and predictability. Random events feel threatening. They are beyond control. If we can convince ourselves that events are patterned, that they follow rules, then they feel more predictable and controllable. So we unconsciously seek and find patterns as a way of managing our anxiety about randomness. There is also a narrative component. Humans are storytellers. We understand the world through narrative. A random string of events is just that, random. But a patterned string of events is a story, something with meaning and structure. Our minds prefer stories to randomness, so we construct stories by finding patterns. What does the clustering illusion tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that we often believe we understand people's behavior through patterns that we have detected, but that may not be real. You observe that your partner always acts a certain way in certain situations, so you believe you have detected a pattern. But human behavior is complex and influenced by countless factors. The pattern you think you have detected may be a cognitive artifact, an illusion produced by your pattern-seeking brain. You observe that people from a certain group tend to behave a certain way, and you construct a stereotype. You are noticing a pattern in the behavior, but stereotypes are typically based on the clustering illusion. You are remembering the times when the pattern held and forgetting the many times when it did not. You have fallen victim to the clustering illusion and mistaken randomness for pattern and differences for typicality. It suggests that seeing people clearly requires resisting the urge to construct simple narratives and patterns. It requires acknowledging that people are complex, that their behavior is influenced by many factors, that what looks like a clear pattern is often an illusion. It requires intellectual humility. It also suggests that we should be skeptical of our own pattern-seeking instincts. When you think you have noticed a pattern in someone's behavior or in a group of people, be skeptical. Ask yourself whether you are remembering the times the pattern held and forgetting the times it did not. Are you seeing a real pattern or constructing an illusory one? This skepticism does not mean ignoring all patterns, but it means approaching our pattern finding with greater care and doubt. 9. The false consensus effect. Why you think everyone agrees with you. You have a political belief and opinion about how the world works, a preference for how things should be done. You believe that this belief is shared by most people. People who disagree with you seem like a minority, outliers, not normal. But your belief may not be as widely shared as you assume. You are experiencing the false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is the tendency to overestimate the extent to which other people agree with you, hold the same beliefs, and would behave the way you would behave. We see our own beliefs and preferences as more common, more normal, and more representative of society than they actually are. The effect was first documented by Lee Ross and Constance Ward in 1995 in a now famous study where they showed college students two options for resolving a social dilemma and asked them which they would choose. Participants who chose option A estimated that 71% of other students would choose option A. Participants who chose option B estimated that 65% of other students would choose option B. The two groups could not both be right. Yet each group was convinced that most people agreed with them. The false consensus effect appears in every domain. People who like horror movies think most people like horror movies. People who are religious think most people are religious. People who are skeptical of technology think most people are skeptical. People who are very concerned about health think most people are. We all believe that our group is the mainstream and other groups are the outliers. The mechanism involves several processes. First, there is exposure bias. You spend more time with people who are similar to you, who share your beliefs and preferences. Your social network is not a representative sample of humanity. It is skewed toward people like you, so you get repeated exposure to people who agree with you and less exposure to people who disagree. This creates the false sense that you are in the majority. Second, there is the tendency to assume that similarity is more widespread than it actually is. You identify with people you perceive as similar to you, and you extrapolate from that similarity. If you share a belief or preference with someone, you tend to assume they share other beliefs and preferences with you. You assume they are like you in other ways. This overestimation of similarity extends to the general population. Third, there is our tendency to focus on our own perspective as the reference point. When we make judgments about what is normal, what is typical, what is common, we use ourselves as the anchor point. We start with what is true of us and adjust outward. But the adjustment is often insufficient. We end up thinking others are more similar to us than they actually are. The false consensus effect is related to but distinct from the false uniqueness effect, which is the opposite bias. People often believe that their negative characteristics are more common than they actually are. False consensus about their negative traits, while believing that their positive characteristics are rarer than they actually are. You think everyone has your flaws, but you are the only one with your strengths. These two biases working together create a distorted view of the world. The false consensus effect has important social implications. It contributes to polarization. Each group believes that they are the reasonable center and that the other side is a fringe outlier. This feeling that you are in the mainstream and others are extreme makes productive dialogue difficult. How do you negotiate with people who you believe are clearly in the minority, who clearly do not represent normal human thought? It also affects how people evaluate evidence. If you believe that most people share your view of the world, then evidence that contradicts your view seems to challenge not just your personal beliefs, but the consensus of normal people. This makes disagreement feel more threatening. What does the false consensus effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that the world is more diverse in its beliefs and preferences than most of us assume. That person who seems so different, so wrong, so outlier in their views may actually be part of a much larger group than you realize. There may be millions of people who share their perspective. Your sense of what is mainstream is distorted by your social network. It suggests that we should not trust our gut sense of consensus. We should actually look at data about what people believe and prefer. We should actively seek out people with different views. We should intentionally expand our social networks beyond the bubble of similarity we naturally gravitate toward. It also suggests something important about judging and understanding other people. When you encounter someone with beliefs or preferences very different from your own, do not assume that they are outliers or exceptions. Do not assume that their perspective is bizarre or fundamentally irrational. Assume instead that there are probably many other people who share their perspective, that your lack of exposure to them says more about your social network than about the validity or rarity of their views. Most importantly, the false consensus effect reminds us that our view of normal is distorted. We are living in a filter bubble, a network of similarity that creates the illusion of consensus. Seeing people clearly means recognizing that other people are not living in the same bubble as you. They have different information, different social networks, different experiences. What seems obvious and normal to you may seem bizarre and wrong to them, and vice versa. The disagreement is not because they are irrational, it is because we are in different bubbles. 10. The actor-observer. Bias. How you blame people for themselves, but yourself for circumstances. You are late to an important meeting. You immediately think it is because of traffic, because an unexpected situation came up, because circumstances forced your hand. It is not your fault. But when a colleague is late, you think they are irresponsible, they do not prioritize meetings, they are flaky. You are making different attributions about the same behavior, depending on whether you are the actor or the observer. This is the actor-observer bias, also called the fundamental attribution error when discussing others and the ultimate attribution error when discussing yourself. It is the tendency to attribute your own behavior to external circumstances and situational factors while attributing other people's behavior to internal personality traits and character. The effect was first systematized by Edward Jones and Richard Nisbett in 1971. They showed that people make systematically different attributions depending on whether they are the actor or the observer. When asked why they are good at what they are good at, people attribute it to circumstances. They had good training, they grew up in the right environment. When asked why someone else is good at something, they attribute it to the person's talent, intelligence, and character. This bias appears in relationships where it is particularly damaging. Your partner forgets an important date, and you attribute it to not caring, not valuing your relationship. Forgetfulness. When you forget an important date, you attribute it to being busy, distracted, overwhelmed. The same behavior produces different attributions depending on the perspective. The actor-observer bias also appears in work environments. A colleague makes a mistake, and you blame their incompetence, judgment, or carelessness. When you make a mistake, you blame the circumstances, being under stress, not having good information, being overwhelmed. A colleague completes a project successfully, and you attribute it to luck, good fortune, favorable circumstances. When you complete a project successfully, you attribute it to your skill, intelligence, and effort. The mechanism behind the actor-observer bias involves perspective and information access. As the actor in a situation, you are acutely aware of the situational constraints acting on you. You are aware of the time pressure, the unexpected obstacles, the incomplete information you are working with. You are inside the situation, acutely aware of its complexity. As the observer, you do not have this information. You are observing from the outside. The behavior is salient. The situation is background. Additionally, there is a perceptual asymmetry at work. When you are the actor, your behavior is just what you happen to do in that moment. But when you are observing someone else, their behavior stands out against the background of the situation. It seems more diagnostic of who they are. This figure background distinction leads to different attributions. There is also a self-serving bias component, where people attribute their successes to internal factors and their failures to external factors while making the opposite attribution for others. Your success is because you were talented. Their success is because they got lucky. Your failure is because of circumstances. Their failure is because they are not good enough. What does the actor-observer bias tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that you are almost always making unfair attributions about other people. You are attributing their behavior to their character while ignoring the situational constraints they are facing. The difficult colleague might not be difficult because of who they are, but because of what they are dealing with: stress at home, financial pressures, relationship issues. The person who seems selfish might not be selfish, but overwhelmed and struggling to meet their own needs. It suggests that compassion requires actively considering situational factors. When judging someone's behavior intentionally, ask what situational factors might have contributed to that behavior. What constraints were they facing? What information did they lack? What stress were they under? By deliberately considering situational factors, you can correct for the actor-observer bias. It also suggests that we should judge ourselves differently than we judge others. We are quick to attribute our behavior to circumstances, but we should also consider how our personality might have contributed. We are quick to attribute others' behavior to their character, but we should be just as willing to consider how circumstances might have shaped their behavior. Most importantly, the actor-observer bias should make you recognize that your immediate judgments about other people are usually wrong. Someone cuts you off in traffic and you think they are a bad driver. You are probably wrong. They may be a careful driver dealing with an unusual circumstance. Someone says something unkind and you think they are mean. You are probably wrong. They may be a kind person dealing with stress. The initial attribution is almost always a distortion. Seeing people clearly means resisting those initial attributions and asking what you do not know, what situational factors might be operating, what constraints and pressures the person might be facing. It means giving people the same grace you give yourself the grace to be understood in context. 11. The IKEA effect. Why you love things. You build yourself. You assemble a bookcase from IKEA. It is not the most elegant piece of furniture. There are definitely more beautiful bookcases in the store. But you love it. You think it is well-made, attractive, well-designed. You are displaying it prominently in your home. Someone else might look at it and wonder why you love that particular bookcase. You love it because you built it. This is the IKEA effect, the tendency to place higher value on objects you have assembled or created yourself than on identical objects that someone else has assembled or created. The effect is named after the furniture company IKEA, where customers assemble their own furniture. The company has understood for years that people love their IKEA furniture disproportionately because they built it themselves. The IKEA effect was first documented experimentally by Michael Norton, Dan Ariely, and Daniel Moshe in 2012. In their studies, they asked participants to either assemble an IKEA box or to purchase an already assembled box. Participants who assembled the box valued it far more highly than those who purchased it. They were willing to pay significantly more for it, even though they knew that people who bought it already assembled valued it much less. The effect extends far beyond furniture. People overvalue products they have helped design, websites they have helped build, meals they have prepared themselves, businesses they have started. You value a meal you cooked yourself more than an identical meal prepared by someone else. You value a plant you grew from a seed more than an identical plant purchased at a nursery. The mechanism behind the IKEA effect involves effort justification. When you invest effort into creating something, you experience that effort as evidence that the thing must be valuable. The effort itself becomes part of your valuation. Your brain reasons that you would not have expended all this effort for something not worth valuing. So the value of the object becomes entangled with the effort you invested in it. There is also an ownership effect where ownership itself increases valuation. Once something is yours, you value it more than you did before you owned it. This is related to loss aversion, the fact that you feel losses more acutely than equivalent gains. Once you own something, the thought of giving it up feels like a loss, so you value it more to avoid that loss. The IKEA effect also involves what is called endowment effect, where people value things more highly simply because they own them. There is also a documentation bias, where the effort of creating something becomes encoded in your memory. Every time you look at the thing you built, you remember the effort, the struggle, the triumph of creation. The object carries all that emotional weight. What does the IKEA effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people overvalue things they have invested in, things they have worked hard on, things they have created. This is not just about material objects. People overvalue ideas. They have come up with plans. They have developed strategies. They have helped create. The effort they invested distorts their valuation. This has implications for how people evaluate each other's work. Someone presents an idea that they worked hard on and they believe it is brilliant. Someone else could look at the same idea and think it is mediocre. The effort invested has inflated the valuation. This does not mean the idea is not good, but it means we should be skeptical of valuations that might be influenced by effort justification. It suggests that we should be more forgiving of other people's attachment to their creations, their ideas, their plans. When someone is overly attached to a project or idea, overly defensive of it, the IKEA effect may be at play. They have invested effort, and that effort has inflated their valuation of the thing. This does not make them irrational, it makes them human. It also suggests something positive about the IKEA effect. It suggests that people value things more when they have participated in creating them. This is why participation and agency matter. This is why people take more ownership of goals they have helped set. This is why people care more about organizations they have helped build. The effort they invest increases their attachment and valuation. Most importantly, the IKEA effect reminds us that our valuations are not purely based on objective merit. Effort, investment, ownership, and agency all distort how we value things, people, projects, ideas. Seeing people clearly means recognizing that their overvaluation of their creations is not stupidity or bias. It is a natural consequence of being human, of investing effort into things and having that effort become part of the value calculus. 12. The bystander effect. Why people do less to help when others are around. A person collapses on the street. There are many people around. You would think that with more people there would be more likelihood that someone would help, that someone would call 911, that someone would render assistance. But research shows the opposite. The more people who are present, the less likely it is that any individual will help the person in distress. This is the bystander effect, the tendency for individuals to be less likely to help when there are other people present. In an emergency, when you are alone, you are much more likely to help. When there are other people present, you are less likely. The more people present, the less likely you are. The classic study documenting this effect was conducted by John Darley and Bibb Latan in 1968. They exposed college students to a situation where they appeared to be having a medical emergency. When there was only one participant present, 85% of the time the participant called for help. When there were 3 participants present, only 62% of the time did someone call for help. When there were 6 participants present, only 31% of the time did someone call for help. The more people present, the less likely it was that anyone would help. The mechanism behind the bystander effect involves diffusion of responsibility. When you are alone, you feel 100% responsible for helping. You are the only one who can help. But when there are other people around, you diffuse that responsibility. You assume that someone else will help. You are not the only one responsible, so you are not fully responsible. There is also a fear of embarrassment component. If you attempt to help and you are mistaken, if the situation is not actually an emergency, you will be embarrassed. When there are other people around, that fear of embarrassment is stronger. You are more worried about being judged, so you hesitate, and in that hesitation you often fail to help. There is also pluralistic ignorance, where you look to other people to define the situation. If others are not helping, perhaps this is not actually an emergency. If others are calm, perhaps there is no reason to be alarmed. You use others' behavior as information about what the situation actually is. If no one is helping, then perhaps helping is not appropriate. The bystander effect appears in many contexts, not just medical emergencies. People are less likely to report a problem to authorities when other people are around. People are less likely to intervene in bullying when peers are present. People are less likely to object to something they find wrong when others in the room are silent. What does the bystander effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people are not as selfish or uncaring as the bystander effect might make them seem. The bystander effect is not a character flaw in the individuals present. It is a systematic psychological effect. The same person who would help when alone might not help when others are present, not because they are callous, but because of how the situation activates diffusion of responsibility and fear of embarrassment. It suggests that we should not judge people too harshly for failing to help in situations where there are other people around. The psychological forces pushing them not to help are powerful. It suggests that if you want to increase the likelihood of helping, you should make responsibility as clear as possible. You should directly ask for help if you need it. You should directly point out when something needs to be done rather than waiting for someone to notice on their own. It also suggests something about the power of individuals to create change. When you are alone, when you are the only one present, you have enormous power to do good. You are much more likely to help. But in groups that power is diffused, everyone assumes someone else will handle it. So when important problems are not being addressed, One solution is to reduce the number of people responsible to make responsibility clear, not diffused. It also tells us something about judging ourselves. When you fail to help in a situation with many people present, do not assume you are uncaring or selfish. Recognize that you are experiencing the bystander effect, that your brain is diffusing responsibility because there are other people around. Understanding the effect does not eliminate it, but it can help you recognize it and consciously work against it. Most importantly, the bystander effect reminds us that people are not isolated decision makers. We are social beings, constantly reading each other, looking for social cues, using others' behavior to define situations. In a group, we are not just ourselves making independent judgments. We are part of a system where our actions are interdependent. Seeing people clearly means recognizing not just their individual psychology, but their social context. 13. The availability. Heuristic: why memorable threats seem prevalent. Plane crashes are terrifying. They are dramatic, unusual, terrible. When a plane crashes, it is news. It stays in your memory. You hear about it repeatedly. It feels common. You believe that flying is dangerous, but in reality, air travel is vastly safer than driving. You are statistically far more likely to die in a car accident than in a plane crash. Yet your fear of flying is greater than your fear of driving. Because plane crashes are more available to your memory, they are more memorable, more emotionally vivid. This is the availability heuristic, the tendency to estimate the frequency or probability of something based on how easily examples come to mind, how memorable they are. If examples are readily available in your memory, if they are easy to recall, then you believe that thing is common. If examples are not readily available, then you believe it is rare. The availability heuristic was first systematized by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in 1973. They asked people whether there are more words in English that start with the letter R, or more words that have R as the third letter. Most people said more words start with R. In reality, there are more words with R as the third letter. But words that start with R are easier to recall, so people thought they were more common. The availability heuristic applies to almost everything. After seeing news coverage of a crime, you believe crime is more prevalent than it actually is. After seeing statistics on a particular health condition, you become convinced you have that condition. After a divorce scandal, you believe divorce is more common than you thought. The availability of examples from the media or from your memory distorts your estimate of actual prevalence. The mechanism involves memory and cognitive ease. When you try to estimate how common something is, your brain searches memory for examples. If examples come to mind easily, if they are readily available, then your brain interprets that ease of retrieval as evidence that the thing is common. The ease of retrieval becomes a proxy for actual frequency. This is a useful heuristic in many cases. Things that are actually common are usually more available in memory. But it fails when availability is determined by factors other than actual frequency. News coverage determines availability. Emotional impact determines availability. Personal experience determines availability, but these are often uncorrelated with actual frequency. The availability heuristic also interacts with media coverage and social media. News outlets disproportionately cover unusual events. Plane crashes are news, car accidents are not. So through the availability heuristic, people overestimate the risk of plane crashes. Social media algorithms amplify popular emotional content, so the feed is filled with examples that activate the availability heuristic for whatever current concern is trending. What does the availability heuristic tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that you are likely overestimating the prevalence of certain traits, behaviors, and characteristics in the people around you based on memorable examples. You know a person who is dishonest, and that example is vivid in your memory. You believe that dishonesty is more prevalent than it actually is. You hear about a friend who got fired and remember another friend getting fired and start to believe that job loss is common when it may not be. It suggests that your sample of information about people is biased. You are not randomly sampling information about the people in the world. You are remembering vivid, memorable examples. Those memorable examples are not representative. The average person is not like the most memorable examples you can recall. It also suggests that you should actively compensate for the availability heuristic. When you are trying to estimate whether something is common or how prevalent certain traits are, force yourself to think about base rates. How many people actually have this trait? How many people actually experience this outcome? Do not rely on memorable examples. Rely on actual statistics. It also tells us something about understanding individual people. When you interact with someone and you have vivid, memorable examples of them doing something good or bad, that example may be disproportionately affecting your overall judgment of them. You have one vivid memory of your partner being unkind, and that memory is available in your thinking, so you remember them as unkind. But that vivid memory may not be representative of their overall character. Most importantly, the availability heuristic reminds us that we are not rational information processors. We are driven by the content of memory, by what is vivid and memorable. Our worldview is shaped not by actual frequencies, but by memorable examples. Seeing people clearly means recognizing that your vivid examples are not representative and compensating for that bias. 14. The confirmation bias. How you find evidence for what you already believe. You believe your friend is selfish. You observe their behavior through the lens of this belief. When they do something generous, you interpret it as self-interested. When they do something unkind, you see it as confirmation of their selfishness. You are not seeing them objectively. You are seeing them through the filter of your existing belief. Your belief shapes what you pay attention to, how you interpret what you observe, and what you remember. This is confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, seek, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms your pre-existing beliefs. Once you believe something, your mind becomes a confirmation-seeking machine, working to find evidence that supports that belief and to discount evidence against it. Confirmation bias was first scientifically described in 1960 by psychologist Peter Wason in his selection task experiments. He asked participants to determine the rule governing a sequence of 3 numbers. Participants could generate their own sequences and be told whether they fit the rule. Most participants generated sequences that confirmed their current hypothesis rather than sequences that would disconfirm it. They were seeking confirmation rather than truth. The mechanism behind confirmation bias involves information processing and motivation. Your brain is motivated to maintain a coherent, stable worldview. A belief that contradicts your existing beliefs threatens that coherence, so your brain protects existing beliefs by actively filtering incoming information. You pay attention to information that confirms your beliefs. You discount information that contradicts them. The result is a systematically distorted view of reality that happens to confirm what you already believe. There is also a memory component. You remember confirming instances better than disconfirming ones. Your friend did something generous, but you interpret it as self-interested, and you forget about it. Your friend did something unkind, and you remember it, because it confirms your belief. Over time, your memory becomes skewed toward confirming instances. Confirmation bias interacts with the tendency to hold implicit theories about people. Once you form a theory about someone, your brain works to confirm that theory. You have implicit theories about what smart people are like, what honest people are like, what selfish people are like. Once you categorize someone into one of these categories, confirmation bias causes you to interpret their behavior through that categorical lens. What does confirmation bias tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that your perception of people is actively distorted by your beliefs about them. You are not objectively seeing people. You are seeing them through the filter of your existing beliefs. The person you see as intelligent will be perceived as intelligent even when they make mistakes. The mistakes will be interpreted as understandable slips. The person you see as unintelligent will be perceived as unintelligent even when they succeed. The success will be interpreted as luck. It suggests that forming first impressions of people is particularly dangerous, because once formed, those impressions tend to be self-perpetuating. You form a belief about someone. Your brain then works to confirm that belief. Over time, the belief becomes entrenched not because the evidence supports it, but because confirmation bias makes the evidence seem to support it. It also suggests that to see people clearly, you need to actively seek disconfirming evidence. When you have formed a belief about someone, force yourself to look for evidence against that belief. Notice when they do things that contradict your belief. Remember those moments. By actively seeking disconfirming evidence, you can partially counteract confirmation bias. It also tells us something about arguments and disagreements. When you disagree with someone, both of you are experiencing confirmation bias. You are each seeking evidence that supports your position and discounting evidence against it. Neither of you is seeing the situation objectively. This does not mean that truth does not exist, but it means that arriving at it requires recognizing the power of confirmation bias on both sides. Most importantly, confirmation bias reminds us that we are not objective observers of reality. We are active interpreters working to create a consistent, coherent view of the world. That interpretation is shaped by our existing beliefs and expectations. Seeing people clearly requires recognizing that your perception of them is already filtered through confirmation bias. You are not seeing them as they are. You are seeing them as your beliefs about them lead you to see them. 15. The Backfire Effect, Part 2. Understanding Belief. Polarization. Earlier, we discussed the backfire effect, where presenting evidence against a belief actually strengthens that belief. But there is a related phenomenon even more fundamental to human psychology that makes clear seeing of people even more difficult. It is called belief polarization, the tendency for contradictory evidence not just to fail to change minds, but to actually push people more toward their original position. Belief polarization goes beyond the backfire effect. Even when people are exposed to evidence they should find convincing evidence presented in a neutral way, they still shift toward their original position rather than toward a compromise position. If two people with opposite views are each presented with evidence supporting the other side, both may end up moving closer to their original position rather than toward each other. The mechanism behind belief polarization involves several processes, including motivated reasoning, where people are motivated to defend their existing beliefs, and so they carefully scrutinize contradictory evidence looking for flaws. They are also motivated to bolster their own position, so they remember supporting evidence more vividly than contradictory evidence. There is also a group polarization effect, where people's beliefs shift toward more extreme versions of their original position when they are in groups of like-minded individuals. Group discussion amplifies existing tendencies toward one pole or the other. What does belief polarization tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that the simple presentation of evidence is not going to change minds. People's beliefs are deeply tied to their identity and their social connections. Attacking a belief means attacking the person's sense of self and their membership in a community. It suggests that when we try to correct someone's belief or change their mind, we are not engaged in simple information transfer. We are engaged in a complex social and psychological process where identity is at stake, where group membership is involved, where the person feels threatened. It also suggests that people are not irrational for resisting evidence. They are protecting something fundamental, their sense of self. The resistance makes emotional sense, even if it does not make logical sense. Most importantly, belief polarization reminds us that seeing people clearly means understanding that their beliefs are not simply true or false, but are embedded in identity and community. Seeing someone clearly means understanding not just what they believe, but why their identity and community connections might be pushing them toward those beliefs. 16. The Dunning-Kruger Effect, Part 2. Expertise and Arrogance. We discussed the Dunning-Kruger effect earlier, but there is more nuance to understanding how expertise and confidence interact. Not only do incompetent people overestimate their abilities, but there is an additional layer. Whereas people begin to develop expertise, they initially become more confident before they develop enough expertise to realize how much they do not know. This creates a particular danger period where someone has just enough knowledge to be dangerous, but not enough knowledge to understand their limitations. They are confident in their half-knowledge. They are willing to take risks, make recommendations, take leadership positions based on their incomplete understanding. As people continue to develop expertise, their confidence may actually decrease initially as they become aware of the complexity of the domain. But eventually, with true mastery, comes a restored confidence, but a more calibrated confidence that understands its own limits. What does this tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that confidence is not a linear indicator of competence. A moderately knowledgeable person may be more confident than a highly knowledgeable person. A person in the confidence valley may be more dangerous, more willing to make strong claims than someone with genuine expertise. 17. The illusion of asymmetric insight. I understand you better than you understand me. You believe you understand the people around you better than they understand you. You believe you have insight into their motivations, their character, their thoughts, but you believe they lack this insight into you. They misunderstand you, but you understand them. This is the illusion of asymmetric insight, the tendency to believe that your understanding of others is more accurate and deeper than others' understanding of you. You see others as transparent and easy to understand. You see yourself as complex and often misunderstood. This asymmetry is actually illusory. Other people probably understand you about as well as you understand them. But the illusion feels very real. You are inside your own head, so you are aware of your complexity. You are outside others' heads, so you only see their external behavior. From this asymmetric perspective, others seem simpler and more transparent while you seem complex and deep. What does the illusion of asymmetric insight tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that you are almost certainly misunderstanding the people around you in systematic ways. You are seeing them as simpler and more transparent than they actually are. You lack access to their internal complexity, their hidden thoughts, their private doubts. It also suggests that people are probably understanding you about as well as you understand them. You might believe they misunderstand you, but they probably have about as accurate a sense of you as you have of them. The illusion of asymmetry is probably mutual. Most importantly, it suggests humility about your understanding of others. You do not understand people nearly as well as you think you do. There are layers and depths to every person that you cannot access from the outside. Seeing people clearly means maintaining skepticism about your own understanding while remaining open to understanding them better. 18. The Spotlight Effect, Part 2. Assuming others judge you like you judge yourself. We discussed the spotlight effect earlier, where people believe others are paying more attention to them than they actually are. But there is a related bias where people assume that when others are paying attention, they are making the same judgments that the person would make about themselves. You make a social mistake, and you are convinced others saw it and are judging you for it. But people often do not make the same judgments that you do about yourself. They are more forgiving, less harsh, less focused on your mistake than you are. This is a particularly persistent bias in socially anxious individuals who assume not just that they are being watched, but that they are being judged as harshly as they judge themselves. What does this tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that your anxiety about how others judge you is probably not rooted in how they actually judge you. They are probably judging you much less harshly than you judge yourself. They are probably not even thinking about your mistake. It also tells us something about how we judge others. We judge others less harshly than we judge ourselves. We forgive others their mistakes more readily than we forgive ourselves. This suggests a fundamental asymmetry in how we treat ourselves and how we treat others that might warrant more self-compassion. 19. The just world hypothesis. Believing people get what they deserve. When something bad happens to someone, you often wonder what they did to deserve it. You assume that the world is just that people get what they deserve, that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. This belief is so comforting, so sensible, that it feels like it must be true. But it is false. The world is not just. Good things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to good people. Bad luck strikes indiscriminately. This is the just world hypothesis, the tendency to believe that the world is fundamentally fair, that people get what they deserve, that outcomes are proportional to merit. This belief feels true because when outcomes do align with merit, it is memorable and it confirms the hypothesis. When outcomes do not align with merit, it is easier to assume that there was some hidden desert, that the good person was actually not as good as they seemed, or that the bad person deserved their bad fortune. The just world hypothesis was first systematized by psychologist Melvin Lerner, who observed that people, even children, are motivated to believe that the world is just. When people witness an innocent person suffering, they work hard to restore belief in a just world. They might blame the victim, suggest that they did something to deserve their fate, or find some other way to explain the injustice. The mechanism involves psychological comfort. A just world is a predictable world. If people get what they deserve, then if you are good, things will work out. If you work hard, you will succeed. If you are kind, you will be rewarded. This predictability is comforting. A random universe where good people suffer and bad people flourish is terrifying. So we prefer to believe in a just world even when evidence contradicts it. The just world hypothesis leads people to blame victims of injustice. When someone is in poverty, the just world hypothesis leads people to assume they must have done something to deserve it. When someone is the victim of a crime, the just world hypothesis leads people to assume they must have done something to put themselves in that situation. When someone is sick, people assume they must have done something to deserve it. What does the just world hypothesis tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people make judgments about whether someone deserves what happens to them based on the just world hypothesis. When you see someone struggling, it is tempting to assume they brought it on themselves, but this assumption is likely wrong. Bad luck strikes randomly. Circumstances are often beyond control. People do not always get what they deserve. It suggests that you should be more forgiving of people in difficult circumstances. They may not be there because of deserving. They may be there because of bad luck or circumstance or forces beyond their control. The just world hypothesis is tempting, but it is false. Seeing people clearly means recognizing that sometimes bad things happen to good people, for no particular reason. It also suggests something about understanding yourself. When something bad happens to you, the just world hypothesis might kick in, and you might assume you deserved it. But you probably did not. Bad luck strikes randomly. Difficult circumstances are often beyond your control. You do not always deserve what happens to you. You may need to extend to yourself the same grace you should extend to others. Most importantly, the just world hypothesis reminds us that we are motivated to see the world as just even when evidence shows it is not. We are motivated to blame victims even though victims are often innocent. We are motivated to believe that outcomes reflect merit even though they often do not. Seeing people in the world clearly requires recognizing this motivation and working against it. It requires acknowledging that the world is often unjust, that people do not get what they deserve, and that compassion, not judgment, is the appropriate response to other struggles. 20. The Halo Effect, Part 2. Reverse halo and the horns effect. The halo effect works in reverse. When you have a bad impression of someone based on one negative trait, that negative impression bleeds over into how you judge all their other qualities. This is called the horns effect. One bad trait creates a negative halo around everything else about the person. The horns effect is the dark mirror of the halo effect. Someone is untrustworthy, and so you assume they are also unintelligent, incompetent, and have bad intentions. Someone did something unkind, and so you assume they are a bad person across the board. The horns effect can be even more powerful than the halo effect, because negative traits tend to carry more weight in our judgments than positive traits. One negative trait can create a powerful negative halo. It takes many positive traits to overcome a strong negative impression. What does the horns effect tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that your judgments of people are easily distorted by prominent negative traits. Someone makes one terrible mistake, and your entire impression of them shifts. Someone acts unkind once, and you start seeing them as unkind across contexts. It suggests that you should be more careful about allowing single negative instances to shape your entire judgment of a person. People are complex. They contain both good and bad. One negative trait does not define a person, but the horns effect makes us believe it does. It also suggests something about redemption and second chances. Once the horns effect has taken hold, it is very hard to dislodge. Someone has to demonstrate many positive traits, many acts of kindness, many examples of good behavior to overcome one powerful negative instance. This is why second chances are so important and so difficult. The horns effect makes forgiveness hard. 21. The sunk cost. Fallacy. When you stay because of past investment. You've been in a relationship for years. It is not working anymore. But you stay because you have already invested so much. You have spent years together. You have built a life together. The thought of walking away feels like throwing away all that investment. This is the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to continue investing in something because of past investment, regardless of whether that something is still valuable. The investment is sunk, it is gone, it is in the past. A rational decision about whether to continue should be based on the future, not on the past. But people factor past investment into their decisions and often make worse decisions because of it. The sunk cost fallacy appears everywhere. You stay in a job longer than you should because you have already invested years in it. You stay in a project longer than you should because you have already spent money on it. You see a bad movie to the end because you have already paid for the ticket. You do not want to admit the ticket was wasted, so you continue watching. The mechanism behind the sunk cost fallacy involves loss aversion and the desire not to waste. Sunk costs are losses. Admitting that a sunk cost is sunk is admitting that a loss has occurred. Your brain resists that admission. Instead, your brain tries to recover the loss by continuing to invest. This is called the endowment effect or status quo bias. Once you have invested in something, you are motivated to continue the investment to justify the past investment. There is also a desire not to waste. Wastage feels bad. If you leave a relationship after years of investment that feels like a waste, your brain is motivated to avoid the psychological pain of wastage, so it convinces you to stay to make the investment worthwhile. What does the sunk cost fallacy tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people in relationships stay in them not necessarily because the relationship is good, but because they have invested in it. They are motivated by past investment, not future happiness. This does not mean they are irrational, but it means they are not making decisions based on present and future circumstances. They are making decisions based on past investment. It suggests that you should be more aware when sunk costs are influencing your decisions. When you are deciding whether to continue something, ask yourself whether you would begin this thing if you were starting fresh today. If the answer is no, then the sunk cost may be keeping you in something that is not good for you. It also suggests something about judging others. When someone stays in a bad situation, whether a relationship, a job, a project, you might judge them as weak or irrational. But they may be experiencing the sunk cost fallacy. They may not be weak. They are experiencing a very normal, very human tendency to factor past investment into present decisions. Most importantly, the sunk cost fallacy reminds us that our decisions are not as rational as we think they are. We are influenced by past investment, by the desire not to waste, by loss aversion. These influences often lead us to make decisions that are not in our best interest, but feel like the only rational choice given our past investment. 22. The Illusion of Transparency, Part 2. Thinking your intentions are clear. You intend to be helpful, but your advice comes across as critical. You intend to be concerned, but your questions come across as nosy. You intend to be honest, but your directness comes across as unkind. You are convinced that your intentions are clear, that anyone paying attention would understand that you meant well. But people are responding to your behavior, not your intentions, and they are often misinterpreting it. This is the illusion of transparency, your belief that your internal mental states, including your intentions, are much more apparent to others than they actually are. You are very aware of your intentions. You are very aware of why you are doing what you are doing. You assume others are equally aware, but they are not. Others see your behavior and infer your intentions. They often infer incorrectly. The illusion of transparency leads to predictable misunderstandings. You make a joke that does not land, and you assume people will understand that you were joking, but they do not. You give critical feedback with good intentions, and people hear it as criticism without understanding the good intentions behind it. You hesitate before speaking, and people interpret it as doubt or uncertainty when you are actually just being thoughtful. The mechanism involves the asymmetric perspective problem. You are inside your own mind, so you have full access to your intentions. Others are outside your mind, so they can only see your behavior. Behavior is ambiguous and open to interpretation. Your intentions may not be apparent from your behavior. There's also an egocentrism component, where you assume that your perspective is more obvious and apparent than it actually is. You assume that if your intentions are clear to you, they are clear to everyone. What does the illusion of transparency tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people's behavior is often misunderstood, and their intentions are often misinterpreted. When someone does something that seems unkind, they may have good intentions. When someone seems dismissive of you, they may have been distracted, not actually dismissing you. Their apparent behavior masks their actual intentions. It suggests that you should be more cautious about inferring intentions from behavior. Before assuming someone's intentions are bad, ask yourself whether there are alternative interpretations. Could they have had good intentions? Could there be circumstances you are not aware of that would change how you interpret their behavior? It also suggests that you should be more explicit about your intentions. Do not assume people will understand why you are doing what you are doing. Tell them. Explain your reasoning. Make your intentions explicit rather than relying on people to infer them from your behavior. It also tells us something about judging ourselves. Your intentions may not be as transparent to others as you think they are. When you feel misunderstood, it may not be because others are failing to understand you. It may be because your intentions are not coming through in your behavior. Most importantly, the illusion of transparency reminds us that we are operating with incomplete information about each other. You see someone's behavior. You infer their intentions. But your inference is likely incomplete or inaccurate. You do not have access to their full mental state, their full reasoning, their full context. You are working from the outside, looking in. Most of what is important happens on the inside, where you cannot see. 23. The fundamental attribution. Error, Part 3. Self-serving bias. We have already discussed the fundamental attribution error, but there is an additional layer called the self-serving bias, where people attribute their successes to internal factors and their failures to external factors. You succeed at something and you believe it is because you are talented, intelligent, capable. You fail at something and you believe it is because of circumstances, bad luck, bad timing, bad information. But other people succeed and you attribute it to luck, good circumstances, favorable conditions. Other people fail and you attribute it to their incompetence, laziness, poor judgment. This self-serving bias is almost universal. It appears across cultures and across contexts. People systematically make different attributions for the same behavior, depending on whether they are the actor or the observer, and whether the outcome is success or failure. The self-serving bias is sometimes understood as self-deception, a way of protecting self-esteem. By attributing successes to internal factors and failures to external factors, you maintain a positive self-image. But research suggests it is more automatic than this. It is not conscious self-deception, but a tendency in how people naturally process information about themselves and others. What does the self-serving bias tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that people are seeing themselves in a systematically distorted way. They are taking credit for successes and blame for failures on external factors. This does not mean they are being dishonest. It means they are experiencing the world through a self-serving filter that distorts their interpretation of events. It also suggests that when people tell you stories about their successes and failures, you should take those stories with skepticism. Their attributions are likely self-serving. They are likely overestimating the role of their internal qualities in successes and overestimating the role of circumstances in failures. 24. The curse of knowledge. Assuming others. Know what you know. You know something. You know it so well that you cannot imagine not knowing it. Someone asks you to explain it, and you struggle to explain it in a way they can understand because you cannot remember what it is like not to know it. This is the curse of knowledge, the tendency to assume that others have access to the same knowledge you have or can easily figure out what you already know. This appears all the time in teaching and communication and trying to help others. You know your field so well that the basic concepts feel obvious. You cannot understand why someone does not understand them. You cannot explain them in a way that makes sense to someone who does not already have your background knowledge. The knowledge you have is a curse because it prevents you from seeing through the eyes of someone who does not have it. The curse of knowledge also appears in assumptions about what others find obvious or easy. You find something obvious, so you assume others do too. You find a task easy, so you assume others will too. You know a reference, so you assume others do. These assumptions lead to repeated misunderstandings and failures to communicate. The mechanism involves the difficulty of simulating another person's knowledge state. Your brain knows what you know, and it is hard to unknow that. It is hard to simulate not knowing something you do know. This is called the false consensus effect when applied to knowledge. You believe others know what you know because you cannot easily imagine not knowing it. What does the curse of knowledge tell us about seeing people clearly? It suggests that expertise creates blind spots. The more you know about something, the harder it is to see it through the eyes of someone who does not know it. Expert teachers and communicators have to work deliberately to overcome this curse. They have to remember what it is like not to know. They have to break down complex knowledge into simpler components. It also suggests that you should be patient with people who do not understand things that seem obvious to you. They are not stupid or lazy. They simply do not have your knowledge. You are experiencing the curse of knowledge, making their lack of understanding seem inexplicable when it is actually inevitable. It also tells us something about explaining ourselves to others. When people do not understand you, when they misinterpret what you mean, it may not be because they are not paying attention. It may be because they lack background knowledge that seems obvious to you. You are under the curse of knowledge. You cannot imagine what they do not know. 25. The ultimate lesson. We are all biased, and that is okay. After exploring 25 psychological principles, we arrive at the most important insight. We are all biased. Our perception is filtered through systematic distortions. Our judgments are influenced by heuristics that lead us astray. Our memories are reconstructed, not retrieved. Our feelings shape our thoughts as much as our thoughts shape our feelings. This might seem depressing. If we are all biased, how can we ever see each other clearly? How can we ever make good decisions? How can we ever trust our own judgment? But this insight is actually liberating. Once you recognize that bias is universal, that everyone is experiencing these same distortions, you can approach yourself and others with more compassion and humility. The biases and heuristics we have explored are not failures of human cognition. They are features. In ancestral environments, these heuristics were adaptive. The availability heuristic led you to remember and avoid things that were dangerous. The fundamental attribution error led you to be cautious of others and alert to their potential threat. The just world hypothesis gave you the psychological comfort you needed to keep going in an unpredictable environment. These heuristics are still baked into our neurology. We cannot simply choose not to use them, but we can recognize when we are using them. We can notice the patterns. We can question our initial judgments. We can slow down and think more carefully about our snap impressions. See people clearly does not mean seeing them with perfect objectivity. Perfect objectivity is impossible. It means seeing them with humility. It means recognizing that your first impression is probably incomplete, probably distorted, probably influenced by factors that have nothing to do with who they actually are. Seeing people clearly means recognizing that the person you are looking at is also experiencing all of these same biases and distortions. They are seeing you through the distorted lens of the halo effect, the fundamental attribution error, confirmation bias, the illusion of transparency. They are not seeing you clearly either. You are both locked in the same prison of human cognition, both making systematic errors in your perception of each other. This recognition should breed compassion. That person who misunderstood you because they are human, because they are experiencing the illusion of transparency. The false consensus effect, confirmation bias. They are not malicious. They are not stupid. They are experiencing the same cognitive limitations that you are. That person who seems selfish may not be selfish. They may simply be experiencing the actor-observer bias, where they see their own behavior as constrained by circumstances while seeing your behavior as constrained by your character. They are trying to help themselves not harm you. That person who seems to hold unreasonable beliefs may not be unreasonable. They may be experiencing confirmation bias, where their existing beliefs shape how they interpret new information. Or they may be part of a social network, where their beliefs are mainstream and your beliefs are outlier. They are not irrational. They are operating from a different set of information and beliefs that feel just as reasonable to them as your beliefs feel to you. Seeing people clearly means seeing them in context. It means understanding that the behavior you are observing is shaped by psychological principles, by social context, by circumstances, by the information available to them by their past experiences. It means recognizing that while people may do things that seem wrong or stupid or unkind, they are rarely doing these things out of pure malice. They are usually doing them because of how their brain processes information, how their beliefs shape their interpretation of events, how their circumstances constrain their options. It also means extending to yourself the same grace you extend to others. You are also experiencing all of these biases. Your memories are also unreliable. Your judgments are also distorted. You are also not seeing the world as it actually is, but as your brain represents it to you. The 25 principles we have explored are not weaknesses to be overcome. They are features of being human. We are pattern-seeking creatures driven by emotion and intuition as much as by logic. We are social creatures deeply influenced by the people around us. We are meaning-making creatures, always trying to construct narratives and coherence out of a fundamentally complex, ambiguous world. To see people clearly is to see them with this understanding. It is to recognize that they are doing the best they can with the brain they have been given, with the information available to them, with the circumstances they are facing. It is to extend compassion to their confusion, to their mistakes, to their humanity. It is to recognize that you are not so different, that your own cognitive limitations are not so foreign, that their struggles are not alien to you. Most importantly, to see people clearly is to recognize that perfect clarity is impossible. You will never fully understand another person. You will never see them without the filter of your own biases and experiences, and that is okay. Perfect understanding is not the goal. The goal is to recognize the limits of your understanding and to remain open to the possibility that you are wrong, that the other person is more complex than your current model of them, and that compassion and humility are more appropriate responses than judgment and certainty. We have journeyed through a landscape of hidden psychological forces that shape how humans perceive and interact with each other. We have explored the halo effect and the horns effect, where single prominent traits create halos and horns that distort our perception of everything else about a person. We have examined the fundamental attribution error, where we blame others for their circumstances while attributing our own circumstances to factors beyond our control. We have seen how confirmation bias filters our perception of evidence to confirm what we already believe. We have learned about the illusion of explanatory depth, where we think we understand far more than we actually do. We have recognized the spotlight effect, where we believe we are the center of attention when we are actually barely noticed. We have explored how the clustering illusion leads us to see patterns in randomness. We have seen how the false consensus effect makes us believe that everyone agrees with us when actually opinion is far more diverse than we assume. We have examined the Dunning-Kruger effect, where those with the least knowledge are often most confident, while those with genuine expertise doubt themselves. We have learned about the mere exposure effect, where familiarity breeds affection, regardless of whether the object of familiarity is worthy of affection. We have examined the backfire effect, where attempting to correct someone's beliefs can actually strengthen those beliefs. We have explored belief polarization, where contradictory evidence pushes people more toward their original position. We have seen the bystander effect, where the presence of others decreases the likelihood that any individual will help. We have learned about the availability heuristic, where memorable examples distort our estimates of actual frequency. We have examined the IKEA effect, where we overvalue things we have built ourselves. We have explored the illusion of asymmetric insight, where we believe we understand others better than they understand us. We have examined the illusion of transparency, where we assume our intentions are clear to others when they are actually opaque. We have learned about the curse of knowledge, where expertise creates blind spots and makes it hard to imagine not knowing what we know. We have explored the self-serving bias, where we attribute our successes to internal factors and our failures to external factors while making opposite attributions for others. We have examined the just world hypothesis, where we assume people get what they deserve, and the sunk cost fallacy, where we stay invested in things because of past investment rather than future benefit. What emerges from all of these insights is a picture of human cognition as fundamentally shaped by systematic distortions. We do not see the world as it is. We see it through a series of filters and biases and heuristics that were adaptive in ancestral environments, but often lead us astray in modern contexts. But this is not a story of human irrationality or cognitive failure. It is a story of how the human brain has evolved to navigate an incredibly complex world with limited processing power. The heuristics we use are computational shortcuts that allow us to process vast amounts of information and make quick judgments when perfect information is unavailable. They are features, not bugs. The question then is not how do we eliminate bias? The answer is we cannot. The question is, how do we navigate a world where we and everyone around us is systematically biased? How do we see each other clearly, knowing that perfect clarity is impossible? The answer involves several key insights. First, it involves recognizing bias in ourselves. When you notice that you have formed a strong opinion about someone, question that opinion. Notice whether you are experiencing confirmation bias. Are you selectively noticing evidence that confirms your view while ignoring evidence that contradicts it? Are you experiencing the halo effect, where one prominent trait has created a halo around everything else about the person? Are you experiencing the fundamental attribution error, where you are attributing their behavior to their character while ignoring situational factors? Noticing these patterns is not easy because they are largely automatic, but with practice, you can develop the habit of questioning your own judgments. You can pause before jumping to conclusions about someone. You can force yourself to consider alternative interpretations of their behavior. You can actively seek evidence that contradicts your beliefs about them. Second, it involves extending to others the understanding you would want extended to yourself. Other people are also experiencing bias. They are also making errors in their perception. They are also seeing you through the filter of their own beliefs and assumptions. When they misunderstand you, when they attribute wrong motivations to you, it is not necessarily because they are malicious. It is because they are human. Extend the grace to them that you want extended to yourself. Third, it involves maintaining humility about your own understanding. You do not understand people nearly as well as you think you do. You do not have perfect access to their internal states, their reasoning, their circumstances. You are working from incomplete information. Maintain skepticism about your own judgments. Remain open to the possibility that you are wrong, that the other person is more complex than your current model of them. Fourth, it involves recognizing that people are trying to do the best they can. The person who seems selfish is probably trying to meet their own needs. The person who seems unkind is probably dealing with circumstances you do not understand. The person who seems irrational is probably operating from a set of beliefs and information that makes sense given their perspective. Fifth, it involves recognizing the social context that shapes behavior. People are deeply influenced by the people around them, by the beliefs prevalent in their community, by the circumstances they are facing. Judging individuals while ignoring social context is to fail to see them clearly. Sixth, it involves extending more grace in the world. We are all struggling. We are all dealing with circumstances beyond our control. We are all doing our best with the brains we have been given. The response to that reality should not be judgment, but compassion. Finally, it involves recognizing that seeing people clearly does not mean achieving perfect understanding. It means seeing them with humility and skepticism about your own perception. It means holding your judgments lightly. It means remaining open to the possibility that you are wrong, that there is more to them than you currently perceive. It means treating them with the respect and dignity that a complex being deserves. In the end, what we have learned is that people are far more complex than the simplified models our minds create of them. We are all operating with incomplete information. We are all experiencing systematic biases that distort our perception. We are all trying to make sense of a complicated world with limited resources. The goal of seeing people clearly is not to transcend this reality, but to embrace it. It is to recognize that we are all in the same boat. We are all biased. We are all working from incomplete information. We are all trying to do the best we can. And that recognition should breed compassion, not cynicism. It should breed humility, not arrogance. It should breed connection, not isolation. When you see someone next time, recognize that you are not seeing them clearly. You are seeing them through the filter of your biases and assumptions, but you can work to see them more clearly. You can question your assumptions. You can consider alternative explanations. You can extend grace and compassion. You can recognize their complexity. You can see them as a human being like yourself, trying to navigate a complicated world with the tools available to them. That is seeing people clearly. That is the gift of understanding the hidden psychology that shapes human interaction. It is not the gift of perfect perception. It is the gift of humility and compassion and connection. Sweet dreams, and tomorrow when you encounter the people in your life, try to see them through this new lens.